On today's show, the LA Clippers were busy at the NBA trade deadline, acquiring Eric Gordon, Mason Plumlee, and Bones Hyland, sending out John Wall, Reggie Jackson, and Luke Kennard. Were these moves good enough for the Clippers to make some noise in the Western Conference, a now stacked Western Conference? How concerning is the trend of missed games from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? What needs to happen for the Clippers to make a deep postseason run? All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to different point scorers, three-pointers drained, who's going to win MVP, sixth man of the year, and even title odds. Right now, the title odds available on FanDuel. You got the Boston Celtics leading the way at plus 270, the Bucks at plus 410, the Phoenix Suns plus 500 after their acquisition of Kevin Durant, and rounding up the top five favorites, you have the Denver Nuggets at plus 750 and the LA Clippers at plus 1200. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Joining us now is Darian Vaziri, the host of Locked On Clippers. You can find wherever you listen to your podcast and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Clippers. Darian, the Clippers were busy at the trade deadline. They made multiple moves, but was it enough in this now stacked Western Conference with a Phoenix Suns team that added Kevin Durant, a Mavs team that added Kyrie Irving? You've got the Nuggets and the Grizzlies and the Kings playing some really, really great basketball. We're going to unpack some of these deals that the Clippers made. Let's start with, arguably, I think it's the biggest deal that they made, which is bringing home none other than Eric Gordon, who was once a Clipper once upon a time. He's coming home back to his roots now. The Clippers moving out John Wall, Luke Kennard, and rights to a 2023 first-round pick swap with the Houston Rockets in a three-team deal, bringing in Eric Gordon and 3 second-round draft picks. What does this deal do for the Clippers?
Well, I actually think this was one of the more confusing deals that we made, because when you think of Eric Gordon, you think of a guy that's instant offense, a bucket getter. And he was a sixth man of the year for your Rockets in 2017. We have a guy right now in Norman Powell who is of a similar physical build, like I want to say 6'4", really strong, big shoulders, not the quickest laterally per se, but can score in bunches. So to bring in Eric Gordon, it kind of feels, for a second, it felt redundant. But then I thought maybe he will start. And even if he's alongside Norman Powell, the one good thing about Eric is he can space the floor. He can hit the open three. We've seen, especially since Mike D'Antoni took over as the Rockets coach, he took his three-point shooting to a whole nother level in terms of like volume and just the ability to hit shots from way beyond the line. Now, I don't think we need him to take too many deep threes, but the one thing I saw from the Clippers front office perspective is this is what he offers that Luke Kennard doesn't. He can actually score one-on-one. When teams go switch everything, which teams know they want to do with the Clippers to force them to play one-on-one, we lack guys that can get to the rim. What I've heard from Eric Gordon, even from Rockets fans recently, he still can do that. He still can put his head down, get his shoulder into a defender, and get to the basket. Luke Kennard can't do that. His value comes from off the ball, moving without it, and shooting the ball at such an incredible percentage. Eric also, when the Clippers go a little smaller, 2 guards, hopefully not 3 guards, because that's been a problem for the Clippers all season, but even like, let's say, Bones Hyland and Eric Gordon in the backcourt, or Norman Powell and Eric Gordon in the backcourt. We saw Eric Gordon this season when the Rockets played the Clippers guard Paul George and actually hold his own, because he's not going to get overpowered from a strength perspective. And that was Luke Kennard's biggest weakness as a defender, was he would get bullied offensively. And even though he has gone stronger over the years, Eric Gordon is a big 6'4", so they fulfill a couple of needs. We won't get bullied as much in small ball when we're going with multiple guards, and he can get to the rim. And hopefully what I'm hearing is I think he's actually going to start and be able to initiate some plays and playmaking pick and roll for Kawhi and Paul George, and he can also be a good spacer for them as well.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, Eric Gordon, a bit, he's never going to be your primary creator, right? He's not a true point guard in any sense of the idea of that, but he can create for others. He can get guys, involved a little bit. He can do some playmaking here and there in addition to all the different things that you just alluded to, right? And this is the crazy thing, right? Is he's been on the Rockets. They've been the worst team in the NBA for going on 3 years in a row now. It's going to be very interesting to see Eric Gordon playing motivated basketball again, because that's the issue is, you don't have motivation to play your best ball when you're on the worst team in the NBA. So seeing him play on a team like the Clippers that's contending for a title, that wants to play, have a deep playoff run, playing alongside stars like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George will hopefully do wonders for him. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition to the Clippers, Darian. But they made a couple other moves too, and they sent out Reggie Jackson and they got back Mason Plumlee. They also added Bones Hyland. How do you feel about those two names and what they'll be able to, kind of add to this Clippers squad?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to touch on something you said that was important. And I think a lot of people, whether they're in the comments or just wandering around the league, are going to be asking me this. What about the point guard position? Everyone keeps saying the Clippers need a more traditional, whatever that means, point guard, even though right now in the NBA, that's another conversation for itself about what a true point guard still is, whatever. You said something, you said, Eric Gordon, you don't want him to be the main initiator. And thinking about it, if you want someone to be the main initiator for the Clippers, they need to be better, in my opinion, at creating shots than Paul George and Kawhi. And how many people that are out there on the market or out there to get traded to the Clippers are better at creating shots for either themselves, not really themselves, but for others than Kawhi and Paul George? There aren't many. People are throwing out names like Russell Westbrook, Mike Conley. These guys you don't want the ball in these guys' hands more than Kawhi and Paul George. So at the end of the day, if people want Kawhi and Paul George to not have the ball at the end of games, you need to bring in a point guard that is very good at creating shots. So I don't think that guy's out there. So right now, Clippers are going to roll with a non-true point guard lineup. Now, you mentioned a name we brought in, Bones Hyland. He is the size of a point guard. But the thing is, he is a kind of a sixth-man energizer scorer kind of point guard. He's a score-first point guard, comes off like a Anthony Simons light to me. Like he'll come in and just start lighting it up, but he also doesn't play much defense. He offers a lot of the same issues and negatives that Reggie had. And the reason why Reggie was traded was because of those kind of issues. So how much will Bones Hyland play in the playoffs? I don't think much. How much will he play in the regular season? I'm not sure. But he absolutely adds some youth. He has some juice off the bounce where he can get to the rim. He has a great first step. And as I said, we lack that. And maybe something to look forward to in the future past this year. But he's an exciting player, and I'm excited to see him light him up. As for Mason Plumlee, you said Eric Gordon was the biggest move of the deadline. No question, it was Mason Plumlee. Because the Clippers' weakest point this season is the backup center. Ivica Zubac has had to carry so much this season without Isaiah Hartenstein. The front office thought we could just go with small ball to back up Ivica Zubac. Guys like Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum at the center. But they're a little undersized, and there are just certain lineups where you need some extra insurance when Zubac goes to the bench, especially if we see a Jokic or DeAndre Ayton come playoff time. You just need it. And in Mason Plumlee, you don't just get a good backup big. You get a guy that was averaging a double-double as a starting center right now. So absolutely fantastic addition to get Mason Plumlee. I can't wait to see him play. We really missed him the other night against Milwaukee, where when Zoo came out of the game, Giannis was just crushing us.
After that loss against the Bucks the other night, I find it interesting, right? The Clippers this season and kind of historically, right? The issue has just been, health. When you point to a lot of the frustrations, the struggles this season alone, Paul George has missed 17, Kawhi 27 games. The Clippers are 17-9 when both of those guys are actually on the floor together. That's a really good. That's a respectable record. But then when they're both out, or at least one of them being out, 14-19 is their record. How much of this season, Darian, is just about getting to the kind of the finish line, the end of the season, and just hoping for health come playoff time for those two guys? How much confidence should there be that if you can just make it to the playoffs, those guys can actually make something happen as long as they're actually both on the court and healthy, especially with these added reinforcements?
In my opinion, and I'm going to be really honest, minimal. I think this team has a lot. I've been saying it all season. This is an arrogance that they may need an honest, real reality check this playoffs. You cannot cheat the process. And in my opinion, I thought we learned this, but we clearly haven't. We think that we can waltz into the playoffs and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George just happen to be healthy and just roll over teams. I just don't think that's how it's going to work. Paul George, you just said they've played 26 games together. That's nothing. That's nothing that they've played together. And we're about to be at game 60. And, I'll say this, the bright side is in the last 10 games Kawhi and Paul George have played together, we've won 8 of them. And Kawhi has played, before this Milwaukee game he just missed, 26 out of his last 33 games. The only games he missed were one with a non-COVID related illness, so that can happen to anyone. And then all the other ones were just he missed one of a back-to-back, which is normal. We know that's it. We knew that him coming to the Clippers, he was going to miss back-to-backs because of his quad condition. And obviously coming off the ACL. But for him to miss that game against Milwaukee out of nowhere, it's not a back-to-back or anything, just added rest. My question is, in the playoffs, can he play 20-plus games in a row without sitting one? There's no back-to-backs in the playoffs, but what makes me believe as a fan that these two can stay healthy for a playoff run with high-intensity minutes against high-level competition when the stakes are just at the all-time high? I don't know. I don't think that the Clippers can just waltz into the playoffs, and if they're healthy, they can figure it out. I just don't believe in that. I don't know when that's actually worked in NBA history, unless a team had prior chemistry like the Warriors last year, who have already built that foundation. People don't know the Clippers' identity, and it's year 4.
When you look around at some of the other moves that were made, that I alluded to earlier in the segment, the rest of the Western Conference, I mean, the West is stacked now. It looks like it's going to be a bloodbath out there. Were these moves enough in your eyes for the Clippers to feel confident going into the postseason? Again, health permitting, obviously that's one of the biggest question marks and consistently is with this Clippers team. Are these moves enough to feel good about a postseason run?
I think the moves, I wouldn't say so, but that's only because, in my opinion, it's not about the depth. It's about 2 things. Ty Lue using it properly, because this year he's just had a bad season as a coach. Personally, I think the reason why Reggie was traded was because he wasn't playing well enough, and Ty Lue didn't really care. He would just keep playing him over certain guys that probably deserve to be getting more minutes, like Robert Covington. And so I think Ty Lue figuring out who deserves however many minutes and just managing the minutes will be big. But the main thing is Kawhi Leonard and Paul George not only staying on the court, but being the best versions of themselves. If we don't get that, the depth doesn't even matter. It's all about the stars. It's a stars game. You need them to be their best, or else there's no chance of having any confidence come playoff time. And they need to start that in the regular season. We only got a couple weeks left, so got to get it together now, go in with a good seed, and then I'll be more confident.
Talking about it being a star-driven league, last thing here for you, Darian. Paul George and Marcus Morris both kind of, endorsed the idea maybe of adding Russell Westbrook if he gets bought out. Would that be a good move or a bad move in your eyes? Or are you pro Russell Westbrook or anti adding Russell Westbrook to this Clippers squad at this point?
In life and in his career, I'm very pro Russell Westbrook, but in this move, I'm not. Just because I don't think the Clippers are in any position to take risks with guys that, yes, he might be a better fit with the Clippers, are coming off 2 seasons, his worst 2 seasons of his career. And being in Los Angeles, I watched Laker games all the time. And Russ right now, to me, is just, to put it nicely, an upgraded John Wall. And Paul George, we've acquiesced to all of his demands with his friends. Reggie Jackson, John Wall, they were both just shipped out. At the end of the day, I don't mean to be like that guy that says stay in your lane if you're a player, but the GMs are the GMs, the players are the players. I trust Jerry West and Lawrence Frank, because when they had Lawrence Frank on the telecast the other night explaining each move, he laid it out very nicely, and it honestly aligned with everything that I believe. He said we need point guards that are not just going to get played off the floor in the playoffs. And you know what? That makes me think that Bones Hyland won't be getting that many minutes come playoff time, but also makes me think he's not interested in Russell Westbrook. So right now what we've had for a couple of weeks is a tug of war between the stars, Ty Lue, versus the front office. Who will win? I don't know. I hope it's the front office, because even though I like Russ, I don't trust him.
Can Kawhi Leonard and Paul George maintain their health and make a deep postseason run? Will the reinforcements be enough in what is now a stacked Western Conference? You'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Clippers. Darian, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thank you, as always.